Thank you very much, Vice-Chancellor, and can I also thank Di and Rebecca and Caroline from CEDA for the invitation here today, and can I acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, their elders past and present, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. Ladies and gentlemen all, it's a pleasure to be here today to address you. CEDA has always been a forum to discuss big issues that face the country and to chart a course for the future. I've always appreciated the platform that CEDA has provided me to look at where we want the state to be and what we will do in order to get there. Never in a million years did I think I would be addressing CEDA, telling stories about cutting Western Australia off from the rest of the nation, deciding on when to open restaurants or whether we should let children go to school, or needing to argue the importance of retaining strong trading relationships. But 2020 has been a very, very different kind of year. The direction of this year has been charted from a very small boardroom in my office on the 5th floor of Jumar House in West Perth. A never-ending run of meetings, virtually daily, for 10 months, 11 months, in a stuffy room with no natural light. Probably not the most COVID-safe environment in hindsight. Around the table each morning, in this room, in my office, there is the Chief Health Officer providing health advice and the scientific underpinnings for our actions, the Director-General of the Department of Health representing the preparedness of our health system, the Police Commissioner charged with implementing systems, enforcing directions, the Director-General of the Department of Premier and Cabinet and the Public Sector Commissioner, both of whom are steering the public sector as a whole-of-government response to the pandemic. And finally, the Deputy Premier and Health Minister, Roger Cook, and I, who are ultimately responsible for the entire operation, its public support, its explanation, its communication and its justification, its successes and failures. Roger and I. Every day for months and months, we have considered the countless aspects of dealing with the COVID pandemic and the consequences of the choices we would have to make, including turning commercial hotels into effective quarantine systems, cleaning and evacuating cruise ships riddled with the virus, deciding which industries to shut, plus when and how to reopen them, dealing with shortages of toilet paper, runs on bottle shops, decisions to close gun stores, the disruption, the uncertainty and the fear which was stopping everyday life in its tracks. No matter the necessity of the decisions, the consequences pile up quickly in jobs and in lives before you even get to the major task of recovery. All of these decisions, the meetings, tackling issue after issue over the course of this year. Thankfully, Roger and I were helped by a team of very dedicated and capable individuals, as I said. At the beginning, it was mostly gut reactions, trying to keep things under control, stopping Western Australia and Australia from turning into the next New York, London or Italy. But we quickly realised there was an underlying logic to the decisions confronting us. Firstly, it's better not to have the virus than to have it. Incredibly, that was an argument in some quarters. The existence of a highly contagious virus in the community means there is always a time bomb for an outbreak. In an aged care home, a remote Aboriginal community, in a mining camp in a suburb. It fuels uncertainty and risk. Secondly, not having community transmission means you have a different set of policy challenges and opportunities for the state. We had before us a different set of choices to the New South Wales Premier or the Victorian Premier. It means we had the ability in WA to safely remove restrictions on activity much faster so long as we could ensure we kept the virus out of our state. Thirdly and finally, if you follow this course of action, keeping the virus out, releasing restrictions faster, you can build confidence in the community that it's safe to enjoy the freedoms that we have and that it's unlikely restrictions will be reimposed. It meant businesses could reopen, hire and invest with great confidence and get life back to normal and fire up the economy again. So we came up with our own unique West Australian strategy. Suppress the virus with vengeance. In fact, eliminate it. We've now gone 234 days without a single community case, only matched by some remote Pacific islands. Keep our essential export industries operating uninterrupted. Use the hard state border to keep the virus out and safely lift restrictions to have a vibrant domestic economy. It was a bold call. It was not without cost, nor was it without risk. It's thrown up consequences and challenges, but it was the right thing to do in the Western Australian context. While Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania and South Australia have suffered outbreaks that could easily have leached out, we managed to keep Western Australia isolated, safe and strong. Because of our patience, looking at the scientific reality rather than rushing to meet artificial deadlines. Now, it means families can come together safely this Christmas. It's a far cry from the situation around the rest of the world. As I said, whilst WA has now gone 234 days without any community transmission, daily, global cases rise higher and higher. The US recorded more than 100,000 cases every single day of November, and I fear it will only get worse in that country after this Thanksgiving holiday weekend. Our strategy to keep the virus out and reopen within our borders was a bold call, but we have never been afraid of taking bold decisions in office if they're in the public interest. Our record of difficult but essential reform over the last 3 3/4 years in government speaks for itself, and I'm going to list some. Liquor reform, planning reform, strata reforms, on-demand transport reforms, energy reforms, the voluntary assisted dying legislation, family and domestic violence reform, joining the National Disability Insurance Scheme, creating Infrastructure WA, public sector reform, reducing the number of government departments by 40% and reducing the size of the Senior Executive Service, payroll tax cuts, commercialising Landgate's automated land titles registry, our sensible wages policy, local procurement reform with the WA Jobs Act, industry participation strategy and the Buy Local 2020 policy, and securing a fairer share of the GST for Western Australia. Horrendously tricky issues that had been in the too hard basket for too long. All of them required a conversation with the public and with stakeholders that they were in the public interest. All of them cost some political capital. But ultimately, making the tough call on the way forward ended uncertainty, let business get on with business, and made Western Australia a safer, stronger, fairer, more prosperous place in which to live. And the public will reap the benefits of these reforms for years to come. Possibly the most unsung version of reform from my government has been our reforms to financial management in this state. We ended the culture of spending every last dollar of volatile revenue on recurrent expenditure, which was a recipe for large deficits and rapidly rising debt. And instead, we slowed spending growth, budgeted surpluses, and allocated windfalls to debt reduction. Just 3 years of responsible financial management with that philosophy produced a $9 billion turnaround in debt prior to the pandemic arriving. And it allowed Western Australia, or it left Western Australia, in a position of strength to respond to the crisis when it hit. Western Australia will run a strong surplus this financial year, just as we are budgeting to run surpluses right across the forward estimates. Meanwhile, every other state and the Commonwealth are running deficits. $16 billion deficit in New South Wales, $23 billion deficit in Victoria. I think it's a $250 billion deficit nationally. And it's 2.5 years until any other jurisdiction plans to run a surplus. But we would not be in the enviable position we are as a state, economically and fiscally, we are today, without doing the hard work over the first 3 years in office. It's quite remarkable to consider Western Australia's strong economic performance over the pandemic. It's a justification of our bold, unique West Australian strategy, keeping the virus out, keeping key export industries operating, having the lightest domestic restrictions within our hard border. It was great to see the economic data released today that showed that the country has exited the recession. Although I need to note, Western Australia was never in recession at all. Today's data showed Western Australia is the only state in the nation that has grown in annual average terms, showing our relative strength across the course of the entire year. Interestingly, for the September quarter, household consumption expenditure in Western Australia increased by over 11%. Over 11%. A record for the state and the strongest in the nation, driven by a 45% increase in spending at hotels, cafes and restaurants as a result of our light-touch domestic restrictions. And as everyone tells me, it's very hard to book a restaurant today. In the face of a pandemic and global economic turmoil, these results are outstanding. One that every Western Australian should be proud of. All the data tells the same story for our state. We have now recovered over 86% of the jobs lost due to the crisis earlier this year. We have the second lowest unemployment rate in the nation by 0.1%. And we have the highest participation rate by a long, long way. We have the strongest growth in job ads, the strongest business confidence in the nation, the strongest retail growth in the nation, the strongest rise in building approvals and the strongest rise in housing, finance and construction in the nation. It's also a vindication of our $5.5 billion recovery plan, our collection of strategically chosen priorities, to guide WA through the difficult times and prosper in the years ahead. Everything from improving our schools to refurbishing police and fire stations, adopting more renewable energy, our building bonus program, which has fired up the housing industry, reducing red tape and planning, waiving licence fees for small businesses, just to name a few. It was a comprehensive and is a comprehensive package of relief, stimulus, public works and reforms, forming an essential pipeline of work for the state. Despite the fact that we only finished announcing the package in August, billions of dollars have been pumped into the state economy already. Many recovery projects have been completed and delivered. Dozens of contracts have been awarded for capital works. And to use the training sector as an example, as recently as mid-November, a couple of weeks ago, over 500 apprentices and trainees have been re-employed under a re-engagement scheme. Over 200 displaced apprentices and trainees have received free training. And there have been over 47,000 enrolments, 47,000 enrolments in affordable TAFE courses as part of our lower fees local skills initiative. But that's just the beginning. There are countless more initiatives on track and billions of dollars to invest as part of our recovery plan, providing support, relief and a pipeline of work for all West Australians, because this is a long-term plan for the future of the state. Now, the pandemic will not be with us forever. One way or another, it will pass. It could be 6 months, it could be 2 years, it could be longer. Humanity, I am confident, will overcome this challenge just like every other before it. I take great pride in the fact that here in WA, we are on track to do so without great loss of life and our economy more than intact. We've done so well, come so far. Western Australia cannot risk what we have secured now. We have a plan for the future. We will maintain our strong record of economic and financial management. We understand the power of strong financial management, the confidence it provides, the capacity it gives you to handle a crisis. Western Australia cannot afford to go back to the old ways. We'll do everything we can as a state to preserve our strong trading relationships, whether with India, Japan, the United States or China, because we are at heart a trading state, and we cannot afford to squander our economic success by losing long-standing trading relationships. And most importantly, we'll deliver our vision for a secure post-pandemic future for WA. If you look at the irons we currently have in the fire, you can see the future of WA writ large. Metronet, with 9 projects currently under construction, will change the face of Perth, how we get around, how we get to our jobs, how our city grows in the future, how we live. Our planning reforms passed this year, medium density, new approval pathways, less red tape, our strata reforms, they will all improve the way we live, stop the endless sprawl and make for a more sustainable metropolitan area. The climate policy we released on Monday will mean WA will be a cleaner state with more capacity for renewable energy, greater infrastructure for electric vehicles from Kununurra to Esperance and everywhere in between, more green jobs, a giant battery, and it sets the state on the path to net zero emissions by 2050. Westport, our once-in-a-century infrastructure investment to ensure our trading economy thrives into the future. Our commitment to and investment in TAFE, freer courses, cheaper courses, and the biggest ever capital works program to upgrade the campuses, meaning no Western Australian, young or old, will be locked out of gaining the skills they need or the opportunities they deserve. Our WA Jobs Act and industry participation strategy will build the capacity of our economy, supporting local jobs with our $26 billion infrastructure spend across the forward estimates. The LNG Jobs Task Force, the future battery industry strategy, our hydrogen strategy, the defence industry strategy, tourism and international education strategies are the blueprints to strengthen our economy through diversification and let us seize the opportunities the future holds. In the next chapter of our great state story, Western Australia will be a stronger, safer, fairer, more prosperous place to call home. It's not a slogan, it's why we do what we do. It's my continuing commitment to the people of this state. Just in closing, I'd like to say one thing. Can I thank CEDA? Can I thank CEDA for all of the opportunities to address you? In the event the electorate doesn't see fit to return my government, I'm certainly hoping they do, in March next year, I just wanted to say thank you for the platform you have given me over this term of government and before to talk about big issues, the challenges the state faces, and our bold ideas to overcome them. I never imagined I'd be here arguing the merits of a hard border with the rest of the continent, nor the importance of maintaining strong trading relationships. But we have to govern for the situations that confront us, and here we are. The success of this state and our nation has never been what's in the ground. It's from the ideas in our head and our courage and the courage in our hearts to put it into practice. CEDA has always been the place to argue passionately for the ideas our nation needs. Thank you. Have a great Christmas and a great summer. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone here. Good afternoon, Premier. Thank you very much for your keynote address. I have to say, as a banker representing Australia's first bank and the oldest company at 203 years, may we be around for another 200 years with COVID, it's really an honour to share the stage with you. I feel like I'm sharing the limelight with a celebrity. It's really positive, Premier, to hear that you embarked on a big, bold plan to keep us safe, and I think many businesses, and certainly on a personal level, we've all reaped the benefits of, the freedom of mobility around our state. And whilst there are still many challenges to navigate ahead, from what I'm seeing and hearing in our business, there is much to be optimistic about. Similar to the stats that you've quoted, I do think we've seen a cautious recovery in business and consumer confidence reflected in spending patterns. Our Westpac Card Tracker Index for November, which is based on the millions of card transactions processed daily, shows annualised spending flows running at 8 points above pre-COVID levels. Housing approvals, boosted by Home Builder Scheme, are up 36% in WA. And as you've mentioned, Premier, unemployment is amongst the lowest in the country at sub 7%. So whilst we're on all these optimistic statistics, I have to say, though, that these all pale in comparison, Premier, when we look at your approval ratings. Last I saw, this was a staggering 84%. Now, most of us can only fantasise about being this popular, particularly if you're a bank CEO. But, Premier, if I were a stereotypical Asian tiger mum, I would say, well done. And it would beg the question, what about the remaining 16%?
Thank you, Caroline. Look, that's caught me by surprise, but I'll just say this. As part of the remaining 16%, as part of COVID, we have to scale up these contact tracing schemes, so we're working on tracking them down as we speak.
That's a great answer. And thankfully, you seem like a Premier with a good sense of humour, so hopefully I'll still have a job after this. And after your keynote and Q&A today, I'm sure you'll convert a few more voters as they walk out the room to get you closer to that 100%. Right, now that we've got the hardest question out of the way, we can go on to all the easy ones. So as we've touched upon, all the headline economic figures are very encouraging. However, as we all know, many sectors of the economy are supported by federal government stimulus like JobKeeper and JobSeeker. So what do you expect the impact to the economy will be with this tapering off next year? And I guess what plans or capacities the state government have to increase spending to help, if necessary?
Thank you for that. So some of these programs roll off at the end of March next year. Obviously, we've done everything we can to get the real economy, if you like, back, and we've used our financial management to do the recovery plan as I outlined to you before. I'm actually very confident that Western Australia will survive the roll-off of some of those programs far better than any other state in Australia. And the reason I say that is that every indicator, whether it's trade or whether it's our domestic economy, our internal economy, is incredibly strong. The biggest complaint I get is actually not having enough people for the jobs that are out there. So at the start of this year, when we had the National Cabinet meetings, we got briefings from the head of Treasury and the head of the Reserve Bank nationally, and they told us the country was most probably heading towards a Great Depression-style situation and mass deaths in the hundreds of thousands. We've avoided both of those things, so much so that our situation now is there's lots of jobs, particularly in retail, hospitality, agriculture, some skilled work, where we're not filling them as well as we could, which is a better problem to have than the reverse. So I'm confident as things go forward, those jobs will be filled. As people see the end of some of those programs, they will go into some of that work and take up some of those opportunities. So I actually think, compared to, say, New South Wales or Victoria or Tasmania or South Australia, which are very, very heavily reliant upon those sorts of programs, that our state will actually come out of it pretty well.
Thanks, Premier. I think we have quite a few property people in this room, judging by the questions. Obviously, WA's population has experienced a wonderful short-term boost as many locals return home from interstate and overseas, which probably helps to explain why the rental vacancy rate is pretty much at zero. We've got a couple of questions here, which I'm going to combine and merge. The first question is whether the government is considering extension of the home builder grants. And secondly, will WA follow the other states in the waiving of stamp duty to some degree?
Well, we already waived stamp duty for many first-home, in fact, virtually all first-home buyers, up to, it's around, I think, $500,000 value for a property. The home builder program is due to expire at least, your application expires on the 1st of January or 31st of December this year, but we extended the time frame for building to 12 months. So that means that basically the program itself and the ongoing impacts of the program will roll on for at least the next 2 years. The program has been dramatically successful. I mean, it can't be argued. We'll probably spend the best part of $200 million on it, and it's just promoted billions of dollars of construction. We avoided the valley of death in the housing industry. It's been really quite extraordinary how well it has worked. It was meant as a short, sharp shock to get us over that period when no one signed up a contract. It's worked more wildly successfully than anyone could possibly have imagined. But, you know, if you roll those things on forever, they just become normalised and they don't actually result in the outcome you want. You might, at some point in the future, want to create another program like that to spur activity. So the idea is, at this point in time, that it will finish on the 31st of December this year, but the benefits of it, as I said, will roll on for 2 years. In terms of immigration, obviously immigration has largely come to a halt. Having said that, Australians returning home are coming back still in very large numbers. We get 1,050 or so a week. Many of those people are staying and they're buying established properties or they're building. Our measures to stop the FIFO out of the east, as much as the premiers of other states don't like that, have been dramatically successful. And I'm sitting here with Impex have made the great decision to move their workforce from the FIFO component of their workforce from the east here. Not only does that result in people buying properties, it also means people with large incomes and their families are here, rather than, you know, the Sunshine Coast or the Gold Coast or whatever it is. And it reduces the reliance upon long supply chains when it comes to labour. So a lot of these things will keep going. And I think what COVID has done is meant that businesses are more likely to have workforces that live locally. And that will continue to, I think, benefit the property industry. And returning Australians will make up for immigration for a fair while. At some point in time, of course, when COVID has passed, we'll get back to an immigration program. When the Commonwealth does that, I think will be a very carefully calibrated thing.
Thank you. We might stay on this property theme, although we've just heard the positive side of it. Now to maybe the darker side with the impact of COVID. So homelessness is a growing issue across WA, and the end of the moratorium on evictions is looming. What is the state's plan to address the potential avalanche of homelessness that is coming?
We don't think that will occur. So the end of the moratorium of evictions happens at the end of March, as does the freezing of rents. Both of those things happen. A lot of the advice we get is there'll be more people come into the market with properties available for rent, and the natural equilibrium in the market will take place. On top of that, we're investing the best part of $1 billion in various housing initiatives to get more social housing out there and to make sure we get more people into social housing. We're working also on a whole range of affordable housing initiatives because the two things are a little bit different. But our social housing investment program, which is partly a COVID response, is very large. And as I said, it's that component is the best part of $500 million, and then the other initiatives take it close to $1 billion. So there'll be a lot more social housing become available over time. What happened over the course of the last few years is we had to, basically, there was a whole bunch of social housing properties existing that needed dramatic refurbishments or maintenance or repairs that we had to take offline. They're getting repaired, they'll come back online. And then there was a bunch of sort of your high-rise towers that were essentially ghettos that we knocked down. And so there was one in Victoria Park, there was one in Highgate, and that took hundreds of properties out of the social housing mix. But they were, they were basically not fit for purpose. So we had to do that, but we're replacing them progressively with more social housing.
Thank you, Premier. I'm struggling to join the next question, so we're just going to change tack completely. Closer to home. A few people would like to know, Premier, why can't we go shopping on a Sunday morning? Because this would increase employment, flexibility for working families, and potentially boost retail spending, all of which I guess we need right now.
Well, we have the strongest retail spend in Australia, and we have huge consumer confidence and huge business confidence across Australia. Basically, the largest shopping centres, the city, can open at 11 on a Sunday morning. Your smaller shopping centres and the like have more relaxed hours. Look, I know it's an issue people talk about. As to whether or not it creates more consumer activity, I'm a bit dubious about that. There's only sort of so many dollars to go around, and the hours that shops can open at the moment are 8 in the morning till 7 at night, 5 days a week. On a Thursday, it's 8 in the morning till 9 at night, and then on weekends it's 8 or perhaps 9 till 5 on a Saturday, and then 11 to 5 on a Sunday. There's enormous hours available for shopping. The idea that somehow shopping hours are some sort of economic panacea, I just don't accept. What I do think, though, is there are a lot of people out there who are in business, particularly smaller business, who want to have some semblance of a life. And for those people, those few hours where they're not at work makes a big difference to their quality of life. Other cities around Australia have the exact same arrangement. And in fact, if you go to cities across the world, you'll find that there's all sorts of world-famous cities that don't allow the shops to open at all on a Sunday. So I know there's lots of arguments, but I actually think that there's balance in these things. I don't think it is some huge economic panacea, but I do think it makes a difference to the quality of life, particularly of people working in small business.
Well, to make sure we have enough shopping dollars and potentially more, I think many of us are increasingly worried about the deterioration of the relationship with our largest trading partner, China. We've already seen disruptions to WA exports of barley, lobsters, and more recently, let's talk about coal and wine. To me, China seems to be using Australia as a bit of an example and warning to other countries. And probably the latest doctored photos that we've seen on Twitter just seem to be, increased provocation deliberately to keep the fires burning. What are your perspectives on this, how this will play out? And how do we toe the balance, I guess, Premier, of protecting our sovereignty versus the detrimental economic impact of losing such a large customer, which, the demand can't be easily replicated or replaced by a number of other countries? So what, if anything, can the state government and or businesses do to improve this relationship with China?
Thank you, Caroline. Well, firstly, the image. Just to be clear, it was obviously not acceptable, and it was a photoshopped image that was not accurate and was hurtful to many people. So just put that on the table. In relation to the relationship is incredibly important. All the people in this room will understand. China is a massive market. It's rapidly growing into a middle-class country. It buys enormous numbers of products from Australia. The state that benefits most from the relationship is WA. And I think that is lost in the eastern states. I think there is an assumption in the eastern states we can do without our relationship with China. Just so everyone understands the exact figures, over the course of the last 12 months, we have as a state sold $100 billion worth of products into China. 100 billion. We have bought $4 billion worth of products from China. We have a $96 billion trade surplus with China. That results in over 200,000 West Australian jobs. 200,000 people depend upon that. In mining, family members of mining companies, the businesses that rely upon the mining industry, the regional towns, all the consumer confidence that comes with it. It's absolutely enormous. So we have built this relationship since 1972. And of course, as you know, China was pretty poor up until 1989. They started their transformation, and up until 1979, they started their transformation, and it really grew from 2004 until now. So you cannot discard that relationship lightly. It is important. It's important to all our prosperity, to the property industry here, to anyone who has a successful business. It is important that we keep that relationship. So all I would say to all of us here, we all need to work to repair it. We all need to work cooperatively to repair it. I put the offer to the Commonwealth on numerous occasions, whatever we can do to help repair the relationship. Business needs to be a part of that as well, putting the offer to help repair the relationship. As you know, when a friendship starts to go bad, best thing to do is to talk about it, and talk to the friend where the relationship might be deteriorating. I just urge everyone at every level to start a conversation with our counterparts in China with a view to repairing and getting the relationship back. I fear for the future if we don't. The idea that a lot of our products we can just sell anywhere is not right. It's just not right. There isn't another China out there. Our other trading partners are terrific. Japan, Korea, other countries around India, other countries around the world, terrific. But the scale and size of China is the same as everyone else put together. So therefore, I'm just very keen, and I make the offer. Anything the state can do to repair the relationship is very important for all of our futures, but also our children and our prosperity into the future.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Premier. I think that's plan A, is to repair the friendship. But I guess by way of a contingency plan, given these growing tensions with China, what is the government's, broader Asian engagement strategy, and what efforts do we have to diversify that export market or, our economy?
We do have an Asian engagement strategy, and it's all about all of the other countries of the region, of which there's numerous, as you know, that are quite successful. And we put enormous effort into whether it's flights out of Vietnam or selling barley into Malaysia, or whether it's avocados into Japan, or continuing iron ore and oil and gas into Japan and Korea. We do all of that, and we have a very comprehensive strategy around it. But our iron ore industry, which is the biggest industry in the state by a long, long way, the vast majority of our iron ore goes to China. I had a discussion with a US congressman a couple of years ago, and he advised me we should just sell it somewhere else. I asked him where. He didn't have an answer. I asked him, does he know the size of the US steel industry, which he didn't, and the Chinese steel industry is about 13 times the size of the US steel industry. So, the idea that there is somewhere else that will buy that product is not right. And so therefore, it's actually important economically, but it's also important for stability in the region, that we all have an ongoing and enduring relationship between all of us. Now, this is not a sovereignty argument. I support our alliance with the United States. I support us being a sovereign state. We're going to be a democracy for my lifetime and my grandchildren's lifetime. That will all continue. But that doesn't mean we somehow create a false argument about our sovereignty. I've heard this sovereignty argument. I don't really get it. We are a sovereign state, and we will continue to be a sovereign state. I served in the ADF. Our ADF is terrific and will continue to be well supported with the best of equipment and a strong alliance with our traditional alliance partners. But we still should get on with our neighbours and the great powers of our region. And we should have an economic relationship with them. So I think sometimes there's a false argument put forward here that you can choose defence or you can choose economy. And I don't understand why it is now becoming so difficult. And we should work to repair it at all levels, state, Commonwealth, business, as soon as we can.
Thanks, Premier. And what do you think, what more should be done to accelerate the use of data science in growing and strengthening the WA economy? Of data science.
I do not understand that question.
There must be a lot of people in the audience who do, because we've got a lot of votes for it.
They're
But
trying to
a
trick
Premier
me.
can't answer a question that he doesn't understand, and that
No,
moderator
that's right.
doesn't really understand either, so we'll move on. So for the 39 people that would like an answer to that, we might have to take it offline. Premier, I guess after this crazy year that's happened, which you gave us some insights into, and the challenges that we're facing with China, which, as you said, affect us in WA more disproportionately than the other states in Australia. A question, a personal one, if we may. How are you coping?
Oh, I'm terrific. I'm good. I mean, I'm a bit grayer, and over the course of the first half of this year, I had a lot of nights where I was quite sleepless. And when we had, various crises, we had cruise ships. The whole cruise ship thing was just incredible. And we had sheep ships, and we had iron ore ships, all with COVID on them. We had returning travellers. We had the outbreak in Victoria. All these things meant we had to do some dramatic things. The most difficult thing I had to deal with was the actual closing down of various parts of industry. And, going into a cafe or a restaurant where they had the chairs on the table, and some poor bugger was standing behind the counter there, all his staff laid off, no customers. It was awful. Cinemas, the same. Nail salons, the same. Sorting out so that we tried to help these people with, rent, and then shopping centres having problems with that. All of these things were very, very stressful, and not really something you ever expected you would do. I called some of the families who lost family members, whose family members died. I called the sort of widows and the like, and it was just terribly, they're terribly sad conversations. So all of those are stressful. And my fear was it would come back and I would be in the same position as the Governor of New York, where we're having mass burials and we're having people dying in car parks outside hospitals. I was very fearful about it. So that's why we were adamant about some of the measures we put in place, Roger and I. We're going to keep this thing out. We're going to kill it here, and then we're going to keep it out. And, you get a lot of criticism from people, particularly some commentators in the East and the like, who have no idea what life is like here. But you just have to stand up to them. So, no, I'm pretty good, and, my family's been very supportive, and strangely enough, in those first few months, I got home every night because all the functions got cancelled. I actually thought that was pretty good. I'm sure everyone here agrees. When I got on the road in the morning to come to work, there was no cars, so I got to work quickly. There was no lines in the coffee shop. There was lots of sort of things that were, surprises. But no, personally, I'm fine. I think, to be fair, across the country, we are very lucky. We've had some very normal people in high office, and we've had some very common sense and responsible people in sort of premiers, chief ministers, prime ministerial roles who have been prepared to work together and to solve problems. And I can think about past eras where we've had some pretty nutty people as premiers, and you have a look at not here, I'm talking more Queensland actually, and you have a look at the United States. I mean, we've got 50 states, half the governors are mad, and the president was a beacon of stability. We were so different, and so it's well supported. And I look at the Victorian Premier, what he had to go through. I mean, what he went through, was extreme, and the criticism and the literal, the madness that he had to put up with, and he came out the other side. So I think we've been very well served by a lot of the people across the country.
It's a tough gig being a state premier, or a politician, I think. Last question for you, Premier. It's now almost 100 days until the election. So what is the biggest job to do, and what is your call to action for all the people in this room as business leaders? What do you need from us?
Well, your vote would be good.
100%.
I'm not sure I'll get 100% in this room. But your vote would be great. But in terms of my call to action, well, obviously my role is to continue to manage the state as best I can to the to the election campaign starts, which is sort of at the end of January next year. But our role is to keep the state safe and strong and to continue the pathway we're on. Put forward lots of policies that continue to make our state stronger and fairer. And that's what we'll do over the course of the election campaign in the lead up to March 13. If everyone here can continue to have confidence and, in our state and continue to invest and provide support for our state, well then that would be terrific as well.
Well, that's all we have time for, so will you all please join me in thanking our Premier, Mark McGowan.
Wasn't that fantastic? Thank you very much, Premier, for your time, your expertise and your very frank answers to the questions. Carolyn Chan from Westpac, what a fantastic job. I think you missed your calling. You shouldn't be a banker. You should definitely be in the media. And I have to say, you were giving Julie Bishop a run for her money with those shoes. They are absolutely fantastic. This is clearly becoming a tradition of the CEDA stage, and I know for one I am going to have to lift my game. You know, it's fantastic to have sponsors like Westpac, Curtin University and INPEX. I'm very in awe of Professor Cordery's Noongar language skills. You set the standard there, and I'm definitely going to be coming along for some lessons. And I think it's already been mentioned twice, but I'm going to do it a third time. INPEX's localisation strategy, it's just so great for our state. It's going to be great for the Northern Territory as well. So Tetsu, thank you so much for your leadership in that regard. We had a multiple choice poll. What we were asking is what should actually be the top priority in the state's economic recovery? We had a couple of hundred people answer the poll. So now I know that next time, like I say, turn your phones to silent, I have to say log in and do the poll, because it would have been nice to have got a few more of you. But half of the people said new industries, new sectors. So I think that's a really marked result. 20% said infrastructure. So John Langland's going to be pleased with that. And then skills, training and education, which are really already over, came in at 15%. So I thought that was very interesting. You know, Premier, you made it very clear that where we want the state to be and how to get there is your priority. And clearly you don't want the state to be in recession, so as the strongest economy in the nation. I think we're ticking that box at the minute. Isolated, safe and strong. I'm okay with that as a message. I think isolation can be taken to remote. And as Rebecca Tompkinson, the state president of the SAC, talks about flipping the tyranny of distance and making the fact that we are isolated, we are safe and we are strong is a magnet for tertiary students. It also can be a magnet for tourists. And so I'm really on that message with you. And the list of reforms is very solid, but I do have to say I am with some of our questioners that there is a gap, and you know where I'm about to go. When I spoke with Cassandra Windsor when she was applying for the role of our senior economist here for CEDA, I asked the question, how do you feel about stamp duty versus land tax? And that was actually the killer question for me. If I'd got someone that said, oh, I'm against every other economist in the nation and think that we should stick with stamp duty, I probably would have been putting that resume on the bottom of the pile, and I can see Rick Newnham over there nodding his head. I really do think that's got to get on the list, and I think the state is strong enough to have a go at this, and I think it will really make a big difference to a lot of little old ladies, like my mum was at one point stuck in a house that she really shouldn't be in. There is one person. Is our Chief Health Officer, Dr. Andrew Robertson, still in the room? Are you out there somewhere? I told he was attending today. Is he here? Where are you? Please stand up. Round of applause for this gentleman. I do want to thank you on behalf of everyone in the room and everyone in Western Australia, but I have one small job for you, if you don't mind. And this is with my chair of the member body of Safe Work Australia, I did note there was a stuffy room with no natural light that was occupied for long periods of time. I don't think that meets the OH&S requirements. I'm wondering if you might be able to lean in on that one a bit for me. Thank you so much. But look, thank you everyone for coming along today, for your questions, making this such a vibrant event. You'll get an email with the highlights of today and a link to the live stream, so you can live it all over again, and it will give you the complete poll results. We have one more live stream before we end the year, Optimising Australia's Rail System for the Future, on the 14th of December with the Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack. And then looking forward to next year, I'm hoping to see many of you at the CEDA Copeland Leadership Program. We've opened up the WA section of that for 2021, and Julia Tolge will be very interested to hear from any of you, give you any of the information you need. So, as we always try to make sure we finish well on time, 2 minutes before time, thank you very much for attending today. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, Danielle. It was